Shortly, we hand you over to our news department for a summary of all the day's top stories in the News Roundup. A lone survivor, struggling for 227 days with faith. No! A grand miracle, garnering 4 Academy Awards. Ang Lee's epic masterpiece. Life of Pi, Saturday on Pearl's Pick of the Year.
咪俾睇唔見嘅甲醛破壞你嘅家庭幸福。立邦金裝抗甲醛正味全效，分解有害甲醛，轉化成水分子，仲超級抗菌。金主，捍衛家人健康，我的靈感，我的立邦。
分享歡聚喜悅，哈根達斯雪糕火鍋，頃刻令派對更添氣氛。Let's party！ 堂食及外賣同步上市。
對付耐藥性惡菌，除咗善用抗生素，
仲要揾幫手。
冇錯，揾你哋幫手。
點幫手啊？
勤潔手就係好幫手。
喺護理病人前後，
食嘢之前，
食藥之前，
咳嗽或打乞嗤之後，要用梘液或者酒精搓手液潔手。
去完廁所就一定用梘液洗手。
無論用梘液抑或酒精搓手液，都要搓手最少20秒。
善用抗生素，
加埋你哋勤潔手，惡菌就冇路走。
Muscles! They stumble and they hobble.
Where's the 50 grand?
50 grand in here.
Out of 24 contestants, only one will make a grand exit. Sunday, Wipeout, Season 6 at 8:35 on Pearl.
Police and Occupy protesters prepare for possible clashes tomorrow. The MTR West Island Line to begin service on December 28th. And the calls for prosecution over U.S. torture of terror suspects. Good evening. It's been 74 days since the start of the Occupy movement. Demonstrators are out in force tonight at the main protest site in Admiralty, one day ahead of the execution of a court injunction by bailiffs to clear out part of the occupied area. The police plan to clear out other parts of the occupied zone not covered by the injunction order afterwards. Protest leaders are calling on demonstrators to stay put at the rally site until the end, a move criticized by authorities. Liz Yun begins our coverage.
Some protesters began removing their belongings today in anticipation of the police clearance tomorrow. Obstacles can still be seen in the area covered by the injunction order, including a section of Connaught Road Central, a part of Harcourt Road outside the local headquarters of the People's Liberation Army, and a section of Cotton Tree Drive. Police said they would clear the rest of the occupied area on Harcourt Road outside the central government offices after assisting in the execution of the injunction order. Some 40 groups have collected over 4,000 signatures in a petition that calls on the police to remain restrained. Some of them are planning to monitor and record the clearance operation tomorrow. City University Professor John Zhe said he believes student protesters are old enough to decide on their own whether or not to stay, but as a teacher, he feels the need to ensure the students' safety.
I think it's more important to call on the police not to use violence. Besides, I'm sure most of our protesters are peaceful and non-violent, so please do not use any excessive force on our students.
Democratic lawmaker Helena Wong said half of the 40 members of the IPCC will be present at the protest site tomorrow morning. But Hong Kong Shield convener Shu Kei called on the IPCC to document the police operation throughout the day. This comes as student leaders, saying they're ready to bear the legal consequences of their actions, called on people to go to the Admiralty occupied site tomorrow.
It's not simply for us to be arrested, but to demonstrate that our spirit, and we would resist till the last moment. It is shown to the government that, as long as the government stick to the decision made by the central government in late August, the Hong Kong society, in general, they will adopt an approach of civil disobedience.
Some other protesters want to see the movement continued in other ways.
It's not because I'm not willing to bear the legal consequences, because throughout these 2 months we have seen how the police are breaching the law to suppress our protests. And if you ask me, I am not ready to face that kind of police violence.
Counting down the final hours before the police clear the core rally site of the unprecedented pro-democracy movement, many protesters who call themselves villagers are insisting on staying put to defend their homes. Liz Yun, TVB News.
Chief Secretary for Administration appealed to occupiers to leave the protest site in hopes of avoiding clashes with the police tomorrow. Security at the Legislative Council building was tightened, and a lockdown of the central government offices was announced, with staff being told not to go to work there tomorrow. Dainto reports.
In a last-ditch effort, Carrie Lam urged occupiers to leave and the parents and teachers of student protesters to help persuade them to leave. And she's not happy about calls by the Hong Kong Federation of Students for demonstrators to return to Admiralty tomorrow.
This is most undesirable because once the police operation is underway, knowing very well that there are some radical elements amongst the protesters, confrontation might become inevitable.
But she added that should protesters insist on being at the site, she hoped they would stick to the movement's core principle.
That is to adopt a peaceful, orderly and non-violent approach with a view to avoid unnecessary confrontation with the police.
Insisting that the police don't want to use any force in tomorrow's operation, Secretary for Security Lai Tung-kwok pointed out that the police would take resolute action against anyone who tries to stop officers from doing their jobs. Meanwhile, the lawyer for the tour bus company, which sought the court injunction, said they've made some requests with the police.
Whatever police operations are to be carried out tomorrow, please do not do that when we are still there, just so as to give the wrong perception to people that we might be the pioneers for the police operation.
This morning, 41 pro-establishment lawmakers issued a joint declaration voicing their support for the police and the clearing out of the remaining occupied areas. They urged the Legislative Council Commission to seek help from the police to clear out protesters around the LegCo building, which the police have excluded from tomorrow's operation.
We have received many complaints from the public that they would like to use our demonstration area to voice their opinions fairly. So they also want the Legislative Council to stop the said occupying movement.
LegCo announced this afternoon that no visitors will be allowed in the complex tomorrow, and the government has notified all staff members who work at the central government offices to follow backup arrangements and avoid the Tamar site. Dayanto, TVB News.
The latest survey on the Occupy protests carried out by the University of Hong Kong shows a lose-lose situation as both the government and the movement are losing supporters. The survey, covering more than 500 people, was conducted over the phone in the past 2 days. The results show 31% of the respondents support the Occupy movement, with 49% against, and 37% of the interviewees support the government's handling of the protesters, while 45% are against. Till the news now. The trial of an employer accused of abusing a domestic helper heard more challenges to the testimony from an Indonesian maid at district court today. Owen Fung has more.
The defendant, Law Wan Tung, was at the district court today for the trial. Her legal counsel, Graham Harris, continued to cross-examine one of the alleged abuse victims, Ariana Celeste-Ningsi. Ariana told the court she was permitted to use the telephone to speak with the defendant only. On one occasion, the ex-domestic helper alleged that the defendant hit her hand with a ruler when she answered a call from a stranger. The defense counsel, however, accused Ariana of lying and making things up. He described her claim of not being able to use the wireless telephone in the defendant's living room as complete nonsense. The defense counsel also said there were occasions when the defendant was kind to Ariana, far from being the monster as described in her testimony. The ex-domestic helper admitted that she was given leftovers from family meals each day, which included rice and meat. But she maintained that the amount was insufficient to sustain her during her long working hours. Ariana also alleged that the defendant only allowed her to go to the bathroom twice a day. As a result, she had to urinate in plastic bags and then throw them in with the rubbish. The defense counsel, however, challenged Ariana's account, stating that the domestic helper had a problem controlling her bladder and was given adult diapers to wear by the defendant. Harris also asserted that the defendant was not violent after discovering Ariana stealing her children's snacks. But the ex-domestic worker disagreed with Harris, maintaining that Law punched her on that occasion. Ariana was expected to finish giving evidence today, but the proceedings had to be adjourned early as she became too emotional. She'll continue to testify tomorrow. Owen Fung, TVB News.
The government today gave the MTR Corporation the green light for its Hong Kong University and Kennedy Town stations to begin operation.
We will be able to open the new section of Island Line on the 28th of December this year. The first train will depart Kennedy Town Station at 6 o'clock in the morning.
The West Island Line extends out from Sheung Wan Station, passing Sai Ying Pun and the University of Hong Kong to reach Kennedy Town. But the railway company says the Sai Ying Pun station won't be ready until at least the end of the first quarter next year. Turning overseas now. Human rights groups are calling for the prosecution of U.S. intelligence officials implicated in a Senate report, which detailed the use of torture and other brutal acts on terror suspects. America's spy agency, the CIA, admitted mistakes were made, but maintained the information helped protect the U.S. and its allies. Tony Saban reports.
These are just some of the hundreds of pages which outline the use of torture and other brutal acts on prisoners held by U.S. authorities and its allies. Many were captured during America's so-called War on Terror after the September 11th attacks in 2001. Some were held at detention camps like Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, while others were dumped in secret jails in Eastern Europe or Central Asia, places where laws governing the mistreatment of prisoners were either lax or non-existent. Now a summary of a more than 6,000-page document by a U.S. Senate committee revealed that the CIA routinely used torture while interrogating prisoners and terror suspects. It concludes the CIA went way beyond its mandate while handling terror suspects.
Detainees were often subject to harsh and brutal interrogation and treatment because CIA analysts believe, often in error, that they knew more information than what they had provided.
Feinstein went on to portray a CIA in which agents with little experience were ordered to handle terror suspects, while more senior officers tacitly encouraged what was going on, didn't care, had other concerns, or were just left out of the loop. In short, a dysfunctional system governing CIA officers, which allowed abuse to go unnoticed and covered up for years.
In November 2002, an otherwise healthy detainee who was being held mostly nude and chained to a concrete floor died at the facility from what is believed to have been hypothermia.
In a statement, CIA Director John Brennan said the agency made mistakes and learned from them. But he also insisted that coercive techniques used to get information from prisoners helped save American lives and thwart further attacks. The Senate committee accused the CIA of misleading the U.S. government and maintained the use of torture and other brutal acts was a violation of international law, human rights, and sullied America's reputation worldwide. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
It was another whirlwind day for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge on the last day of their 3-day tour of New York and Washington. As Alan Buckner reports, it began with a solemn visit by Prince William and Kate Middleton to the National September 11th Memorial and Museum in Lower Manhattan.
The royal couple laid flowers with a note at a memorial pool outside the museum, built on the site of the fallen Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. The note read, "In sorrowful memory of those who died on 11th September,